Good morning. It is 8:25 a.m. on Sunday, March 22nd, 2020. I'm Christiana Ellis and I just got up. This is 5 more minutes. It's Sunday, so I'm continuing my rewatch of Cowboy Bebop with session 25, Real Folk Blues, Part 1. It is Part 1 of the two-parter that concludes the series. And I think, as I mentioned last time, somehow I missed that aspect of it when I was watching these originally. I didn't realize that it was actually going to end. I had been used to these sort of perennial serials that just kind of keep going. And the truth is, in a lot of storytelling, I was going to say Western storytelling, but I don't know if it's really that anymore as much as just current, pop culture storytelling. So rarely do people just write stories that are intended to have a definitive ending because everyone wants to serialize everything. If you're making a movie, you want to be able to have a sequel. If you're making a TV show, you want to have more seasons. If you want, so the idea of writing a story that has a definitive narrative arc with an end point, and writing an ending, it's unusual, and I think that's why there's an aspect of feeling a little caught up by it being a little unexpected. I mean, obviously this is not the end, but we're ramping up towards it. So we start. We're jumping around with lots of flashbacks in this episode, but here's where we begin, right? So Julia, the Julia that we've heard so much about, all of these different, this whole series. Julia is the name that Spike will drop anything for. As Jet says later, Vicious and Julia are like these ominous words, like a magic spell that opens a forbidden door. That's such a cool line, and it's true, right? Because we see who Spike is most of the time, and we see who Spike is when Julia or Vicious come up, right? So we begin. Julia is returning to an apartment. She gets a message. They're coming for you. They're going to kill you. You better make your move. And then in the meantime, we see Vicious leading a coup on the leaders of the Red Dragon Syndicate. It appears initially as though they have gotten the better of him. They trick him. They pull the sort of the Jabba the Hutt in Return of the Jedi move where, they come in and shoot up the beds where these leaders or elders are supposed to be, only for the lights to turn on. It revealed, oh, they knew all along. They weren't in the beds. They're ready, and they've got a bunch of men with weapons trained on them. They say that a fortune teller told them the Vicious was going to betray them. Now, there's an interesting moment there where they basically say that Vicious is going to be executed for the the treachery. He demands that they kill him right there, but they say, for his pride and arrogance, they won't kill him right away. They're going to take him prisoner and make an example of him and break his spirit first, which is ironic given what happens, because it's one of those things where if not for their pride and arrogance, if they had just killed him on the spot, maybe things would have turned out differently. But then again, maybe it would have turned out the same way. Maybe that was really always the plan, because the plan that Vicious carries out later as they're about to execute him theoretically could have been done there on that first attempt, and maybe he expected it to. But I don't know. I mean, it's all a little bit of nonsense, because it's like, just to jump ahead, because Vicious's storyline is the least interesting of all of them, because all that really matters is that he ends up in charge. So He does have a cool line about sometimes the poison of a venomous snake kills slow, and we flash to a shot of the bird indicating the bird's going to be instrumental, and it kind of was, although when it is, what it does is explode into smoke grenades. So, like, that's a weird way for that bird to play its role. And also, it's unclear why the people who turn on the elders and help Vicious there at the execution, like, could they not have done that during the original attack? Like, it was necessary to, I don't know. There's a bunch of moving pieces here, and maybe the point is it's not over important. It's the details are, we're not really meant to worry over much about that. It's supposed to just be cool. But I've said in the past how, like, of this whole series, which I love, Vicious is probably one of my least favorite elements of it, just because I feel like there's no character there. It's just like, oh, he wants to be in charge. He likes to control things. Like, he's got a style but no substance. And I don't know. And maybe that's okay because he's really just meant to be like the anti-Spike, right? He is Spike's reflection only without the substance, the soul that makes us love Spike, right? So in some ways maybe that's deliberate, that there's kind of no there with Spike, or with Vicious, I mean. Vicious is who Spike would be if Spike was not the person we love him, that we love, right? So in any event, the little plot line with Vicious is that he tries to kill the elders, but they catch him. He's about to be executed, and then they, he turns the tables on them and he kills them, taking command of the Red Dragon Syndicate. But in the meantime, though, once this initial coup attempt seems to have failed, maybe that's what Vicious wanted, is he wanted the elders to try to track down Spike and Julia, I guess? I don't know. Anyway, when the initial coup attempt fails, though, the Red Dragons are trying to hunt down anyone who has ever worked with Vicious, which does include Spike and Julia. Jet and Spike are drinking at a bar. They're, by themselves now because Faye didn't come back to the ship, and Ed and Ein left. And so they're just drinking together. But then their, assassins break in, and we have a startlingly bloody battle. Given all of the combat that we've had throughout the series, it frankly doesn't actually get into being bloody all that often, but this one certainly is. And in fact, Jet takes a bullet in the leg, and then we see a guy that looks like Lynn. And if you don't remember Lynn, back in the last two-parter that dealt with Vicious, the Jupiter Jazz, Lynn was the soldier that had once been very loyal to Spike, but when Spike left, became very loyal to Vicious, and twice put himself at risk to save Vicious's life, the second time at the cost of his own. And Spike just being really sad about that because he liked Lynn, and now Lynn is dead. But so this is Shin, Lynn's brother, which is a weird thing. Like, I don't know. I feel like that feels weird to me, but it's not a bad way, really. But so Shin, though, has put himself at risk to help Spike and warn Spike, what's going on. This is why assassins are trying to kill you. But they're going to try to take out you and Julia both. You need to help Julia. She's in Tharsis, and helps them escape. And so then while they go to this back alley doctor to patch up Jet's leg, that's when Jet and Spike have this first conversation about, Jet just musing how Spike really almost becomes a different person anytime Vicious or Julia are brought up. And then this is where we get flashbacks, paired flashbacks, where we finally get some of the imagery that we've seen flash through Spike's head. We get a little bit more context for it. Spike had his last job for the syndicate. He was planning to fake his death, and he was telling Julia, I want you to run away with me. We're going to leave the syndicate behind. I've got a whole plan. I'm going to fake my death. Meet me at this graveyard. And he hands her a little piece of paper with that written on it. After it's done, meet me there. But then we see Julia and see that she's remembering that Vicious at that time came to her afterwards and told her, you need to kill Spike because otherwise I killed both of you. We know obviously that didn't happen, but it's, what we see, I guess, is that she didn't go to meet Spike. But what did she do? We're not really sure, right? We are left with the impression that she was given an ultimatum that she had to kill him. Did she go on the run on her own and not with him? Maybe we'll have to watch the next part to talk more about what Julia did. So in the meantime, though, in the present, Julia has got assassins of her own, coincidentally, right near where Faye is. Faye had just hung up on Spike because Spike's saying, Jet got shot, I need you to come back and help. And he's kind of rude to her, and she says, you're taking me for granted, and hangs up on him, and kind of rationalizes, well, Ed and I are there to help, not knowing that they've left. And it's just it's a little bit of a gut punch after last week for her to realize, like, Faye doesn't even know they left. But there's also a nice, interesting little bit where she's at the airport and sees that the actor who played Punch on the Punch and Judy Big Shot TV show for bounty hunters is in his civilian life, doesn't talk in that shucks howdy accent, is picking up his mom to take care of her. And it's actually a sweet little moment. It's interesting, just it feels like things are changing, and I think we see her kind of feeling that too. But when she sees a woman in a sports car being shot at, she leaps to assistance, eventually learns, says like, oh, I'm Faye Valentine, it's a very common name, and it's like, oh, I'm Julia, that's also a common name. And Faye's like, oh, is this the Julia? Maybe. I don't know. But she doesn't say anything about it until when dropping her off back at her ship, Julia just says, oh, yeah, so when you see Spike, tell him I'll be waiting at the place. He'll know what I mean, and drives away. He's like, wait a minute, what? So we can probably, it's, first of all, I think just meant to show Julia being very cool, right? Like, I think in this limited amount of screen time she actually gets, she is very cool. Right? She seems competent, but also, certainly willing to accept help when she needs it. There's a nice moment where we see her briefly smile at the idea of working with Faye. But the idea that she knows who Faye is and her association with Spike, I think is just meant to indicate, she's cool. She knows stuff. But now when Faye is going to come back because she has this message to pass on, there's a little bit of banter with Spike about, just their constant butting heads about, well, will she tell him? But of course she does. There's more assassins coming. They followed Faye's ship back, or at least maybe they speculate on that. There's, dogfights in the sky. She does tell Spike the whole situation, and this is all intercut with the violence of Vicious's whole assassin coup attempt, the real one. But what we have is a lot of setup in this episode, and what we all set up is leading us to that last scene where the Bebop's damaged. Spike goes off ahead to the place where he was going to meet Julia. We see them meet at the graveyard, where he wanted her to meet him to run away. This time she's got the same gun that Vicious gave her, and levels it at him. What does that mean? We'll have to watch next time to see. So a lot of the stuff that happens in this episode, um, you know, it's basically, I think, just it's set up for next week. So we'll talk a lot more about what happens next week, and I'll talk to you all tomorrow for 5 more minutes.